Well, the Fed have just updated their policy goals. We think this is a significant development for financial markets. Firstly, they're going to put more emphasis now on achieving their full employment target. And secondly, they've also signaled as well that they're going to be much more tolerant of allowing inflation to moderately overshoot their target, at least for some period of time going forward. So I think the kind of key takeaway for us is that the Fed is signaling strongly to markets that they're going to keep loose policy in place for much longer into this economic recovery than we've seen in previous economic cycles. The initial market impact, though, has been, I'd say, relatively limited. To us, this mainly reflects the fact that the policy announcement was well telegraphed by the Fed, and markets had already kind of anticipated that in response. But we do think this is still an important development going forward for markets. It will help to keep real yields in the US low going forward, and also keep downward pressure on the dollar. But we think now it's also important for the Fed to also back up this new policy goal with further policy easing, which could come as soon as their next policy meeting. Well, the Fed's dovish policy shift has increased pressure on the ECB to respond. As we've seen in the FX market, the euro has strengthened very sharply, particularly against the US dollar in recent months, up about 13% from the lows in March. So this is a significant pace of appreciation. And as we've already seen, this is starting to draw more concern from ECB policymakers. So we think there's clearly a need there for the ECB to try and dampen the pace of euro strength. So that's a key reason why we think they should ease policy further. Secondly, inflation as well in Europe is also continuing to fall further below their target. Core inflation fell to a new record low in August of just 0.4%. And really, the ECB just can't stand back and allow that to continue to take place. So as a result of those two factors, we think the ECB will loosen policy further. Again, most likely through a further expansion of their quantitative easing program. But we think also that there is an increasing likelihood that they may have to kind of reluctantly cut rates deeper into negative territory as well if they are serious about trying to dampen euro strength, because they really are facing a very difficult challenge to try and dampen upside potential for euro dollar, particularly when the Fed has been so aggressive. As for the Bank of England, they're similarly also thinking about the need for more stimulus right now. The UK economy is still very weak and is also facing two big downside risks in the coming months. Firstly, we have the end of the jobs furlough scheme, which is likely to lead to a significant increase in unemployment. And then secondly, obviously Brexit is back again. Developments there are not going well, and the longer we go without a deal, the more likely we are to see uncertainty, and that will start to disrupt activity. So taking that all into consideration, we feel strongly that the Bank of England will have to do more, most likely at the November MPC meeting. And in terms of what kind of stimulus are we expecting, we think it's much more likely that they will decide to expand the quantitative easing program again, rather than go down the negative rate route at this point in time. The outlook for Bank of Japan policy has come into more question recently, following the surprise announcement from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that he's decided to resign on health grounds. That has certainly raised questions over the sustainability of the Bank of Japan's loose policy approach. However, we don't believe that the Bank of Japan is likely to significantly change policy under new leadership. At the moment, if you look at who is the favourite to become the next Prime Minister in Japan, it's the continuity candidates who are seen as more likely to succeed Abe, such as Chief Cabinet Secretary Suga. And he has already publicly come out and said that he supports the BOJ's current policy approach. Secondly, we would also emphasise as well that the Governor of the Bank of Japan, Kuroda, his term does not end until 2023. So as long as he remains in charge at the BOJ, we're not expecting any significant change in BOJ policy either. So the likelihood of the yen strengthening sharply on any significant change in BOJ policy, in our view, is fairly limited right now. But we would still emphasise going forward that we still favour a further gradual strengthening of the yen. And in part, that is based on our view that we believe market participants are likely to continue to gradually kind of lose faith in the ability of Abenomics to lift inflation in Japan.